Hello, hello. Greetings, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. It's a pleasure to see you guys today. My name is Dustin Cormier, and we are watching another episode of How to Rock Astrology. It's been a little while. I've been kind of bouncing around. I've been busy with different things, and now I'm glad to be hanging out with you guys live once again. Today in particular, we're going to be digging into Krittika Nakshatra. Let's see, do I have a picture of it? I have a picture of everything but. So, story of my life. Here we go, I always got pictures. Try to make the visuals something special here. Welcome to our lesson today on Krittika Nakshatra. And in particular, we're going to be talking about Agni Deva. Agni is the Deva, the god, associated with Krittika. Now, there's lots being talked about in the scene about the Nakshatras. I've been playing around. I've really been getting into mostly tropical zodiac astrology. And I've always been going through the Nakshatras. It's only recently that I've really just been taking a grip at them. And I want to go through them. I want to learn them. So that's why in this series, I've decided to take all the resources that I can, the best resources I could find, and move through with you, having a discussion on the nature of Krittika Nakshatra, as well as all the 27 Nakshatras. Now, I am a tropical-based Vedic astrologer. So, let me just bring this back all the way here. In my practice, I use the 12 tropical rashis, or signs, overlaid on top of the 27 sidereal nakshatras. I'm just checking to see that I can see everything okay. It looks like we're good. Now, keep in mind that since I'm a tropical astrologer, like what I use in my practice is the tropical rashis overlaid on the 27 sidereal nakshatras. And to be honest with you, how I'm kind of rolling in this series is that I don't want to convey the nakshatras as being with any rashi associations. I'm more interested in just showing the pure nature of these nakshatras. So, in the tropical ideal of things, we consider that the deep space of the sidereal nakshatras is different from the local space of the zodiac, and that's also different from the geomantic space of the houses, the horizon, etc. So these are three different wheels of the astrology chart. And due to something called the precession of the equinox, the tropical rashis are rotating against the backdrop of the stars every about 2,000 years. The equinox changes to a new sidereal sign, as they say. Now, if you want to hear more about that, check out my other videos on the subject. I've really been doing a lot of work on this subject, and feel free to check it out. Now, the main intention here is that we're going to talk about the nakshatras as they are without rashi associations. And this is important. This is something I'm kind of trying to do in all these videos, is to talk about the nature of the nakshatras without distortion from cultural underpinnings of the past history of how the nakshatras have been conveyed. Now I'm going to explain a little bit more on that in a moment. So in this series, we're not going to integrate the nakshatra with the sign that it's currently in, because there's so many different ways of having an idea of which sign, which nakshatra falls into. I want sidereal people to get something out of this, as well as tropical-based nakshatra people. So what I have been exploring is there's different types of authenticity when it comes to the roots, and I'm just noting my sources here, folks. The most authentic and undistorted literature we have available on the nakshatras comes from the Taittiriya Samhita and the Taittiriya Brahmana. So these are a commentary on the Krishna Yajurveda, and they're considered to be a continuation of the Krishna Yajurveda. And this is a commentary on an authentic Vedic era text. Now, much of the other information we have on each nakshatra is susceptible to distortion for two reasons. When you hear about the nakshatras, you'll often hear, like when you read about Krittika Nakshatra by a lot of people, they'll talk about the qualities and they'll talk about the sexual yoni animal. They'll talk about a lot of associations with different things that have come throughout history. A lot of it is there's two main problems that come down there's two main problems that we receive when we're reading about nakshatras from traditional literature. It's twofold, this distortion. Number one, it's the incorrect zodiac association with a certain zodiac sign. Krittika has anciently been considered, I believe, to be around Aries. At the beginning of Aries. Now it's in tropical Taurus. So this is an example of what that's all about. There's associations of Krittika with a sign that is now obsolete. And so we have to glean the wheat from the chaff, find out the essence of the nakshatra without those old associations of its old sign. Now as well, there's the second distortion has to do with what's called the Vimshottari Lord, the planet that rules the first dasha period when the moon falls in that nakshatra. So this is an important one. Vic Dicara has noted that we cannot necessarily assume that the nakshatras have the quality of these Vimshottari ruling planets, because Vimshottari dashas are they're an entirely different system of interpretation. Vimshottari is much newer, which means that when the nakshatras were created, and this is something I'll go like this for, when the nakshatras were conceived, I should say, when the rishis were thinking about the nakshatras and conveying them for the first time, there was no Vimshottari dasha. So we can't say necessarily that the nakshatras have those qualities. And there's reasons why we do emphasize this. Ultimately, we try to emphasize the Taittiriya Brahmana text only as a kind of a general rule. But we're going to talk about different sources. But we want to consider what's given in the Taittiriya Brahmana as the most essential thread of nakshatra information that we have. So why can't we use these Vimshottari lords? There may be useful information there, but ultimately it's better to regard our interpretations based on the sutras of the Taittiriya Brahmana. And we especially can't treat these lords, as so many traditional users do, as if the nakshatras were ruled by them, as if it could express a planet's dignity. So this is just to bring this together, folks. Let's use an example. We're talking about the Vimshottari lord, and let's say we're talking about Krittika. When the moon falls into Krittika, the first dasha that you experience in your life is the sun. The sun is the first Mahadasha period when the moon falls in Krittika Nakshatra. So some traditional nakshatra interpreters claim Krittika is ruled by the sun. They almost treat it as if the sun Krittika is inherently almost like Leo. So for example, if Krittika is ruled by the sun, and Venus has the sun for an enemy, so they almost treat it like if Venus falls in Krittika, it must necessarily be in bad dignity, or that it's unfavorable. Now, Vic Dicara does not use this isn't the level of pure symbolism that Vic Dicara has suggested we operate on when we interpret a planet falling in the nakshatra. And this is just to show an example. Krittika is considered to be tikshna. It's actually mridu, I believe is the word, which is a mix of sharp and soft. Let me just see if I've got that word correct. Mishra. I don't know, I've got the word here somewhere. But ultimately, it's a mix of sharp and soft. So the sharpness makes, for example, if Krittika is ruled by the sun, as people treat it, that would mean Jupiter would do well in Krittika. But Jupiter in Krittika is not the best placement according to Vic Dicara. suggests possible relationship problems. It's not favorable overall, even though Jupiter has the sun for a friend. Jupiter's usually okay in Leo, but not necessarily so in Krittika. So that's why we can't lean on these Vimshotri lords. There's still something useful there. You know, the minutia might be useful information down the line. You know, and the Vimshotri lords is like that. But we should be really considering the bones of our interpretation to come from the authentic Krishna Yaja Veda commentary, the Taittiriya Brahmana. We especially can't treat them as if like Venus falling into Krittika is going to be bad because the sun rules Krittika. The sun does not rule Krittika. So this is just kind of like lining out what we've got kind of going on here, folks. Now, I hope everybody is enjoying the stream so far. We are really just starting. We're 11 minutes in. So, in this series, we're going to be mainly discussing what Ernst Wilhelm, in his Energies of the 27 Nakshatras, Energies of the 27 Lunar Mansions. This is a free PDF that Ernst has offered online. I decided to print it. And as well, we're going to be talking about Nakshatra, the authentic heart of Vedic astrology by Vic Dicara. We're going to be reading from that as well. And we're going to get their interpretations of, like I said, the Taittiriya Brahmana, which is this little book here. Right? So that's going to be what we're learning about first. So, after we go through these guys, then the next thing we're going to talk a little bit about the four classical, some characteristics of the nakshatras that don't come from the Taittiriya Brahmana. This is like the sexual yoni animal, the activity style, the 7 qualities of the nakshatras. We're going to mention them, and also the plant, animal, mineral kingdom, because Ernst says that there's important information there about the nakshatras. So this is stuff that can be subject to this distortion we've talked about, but not necessarily all of it is useless. That's why we're going through this series and talking about this stuff. And then in the very end, we're going to be reading from the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras as portrayed in the Vedas by an author called Radha. Something like that. So, hello Teresa. Happy Sunday. Thanks for hanging out with me. As always, I appreciate seeing you. This is a live stream, folks, and we always like to, I invite people to talk, to ask questions as we go along. We're going to do our best to try to discuss things as best we can. I'm mostly going to be reading from my texts, but if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them my way. I'll see if I can answer them. Good to see you as well, Teresa. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to dive into the classic Taittiriya Brahmana text. So, yes, as we can see here, we're eventually going to talk about the 4 classical nakshatra characteristics. I should have put these after, though. We'll get to them at the end of this section. Now, here is a little image that I've gotten from Vic Dicara's Nakshatra Sutra's course. He offers it online, and I highly recommend people check it out. You can find it on vicdicara.com. He offers these lessons, which you can send him homework, and he'll give you homework on the work that you do on his Nakshatra course. I highly recommend it. It's, what I'm giving here is just a glimpse of the nakshatras. If you really want to get into them, I suggest you look his course up. Now, this is Krittika Nakshatra Sutra, and this comes from the Taittiriya Brahmana. What we read is, Vic got us doing a little bit of this mantra in his course. Krittika's Nakshatra Sutra goes like this. Hold on, let me do this first. Agniyeh Krittika Shukram Parastaj Jyotir Avastat. Blessings to the energy of the gods that circulate through us, which we stand upon and which stand within us and upon us. So this line here, coming from the Taittiriya Brahmana, really has the essence of Krittika inside it. Now, we have some translations from Vic that we're going to go through. The first translation I want to kind of chip away at, though, is Ernst Wilhelm's translation. So to give it short thrift, if you've been reading and following how we listen to and read the Nakshatra Sutras from the Taittiriya Brahmana, how it works is you have these words parastaj and avastat. Parastaj means everything before the parastaj word. Kind of really it's this yellow word that shows the necessary thing that is needed in order to produce the latter word. So sukram is needed in order to produce jyotir, which is light. And of course, agniyeh is the deity, and then Krittika is the nakshatra, but it also conveys an action of the deity. Because these are sutras, they try to combine a lot of information into this one magical line. So, agniyeh Krittika, shukram parastaj. Shukram is needed in order to produce jyotir avastat. Now, the first thing we're going to read is a short little glimpse into energies of the 27 nakshatras. This is talking about agni, and this comes from Ernst Wilhelm. What we read is agni means of agni, agniyeh means, and it really means fire. It's the catalytic system of, there's really considered to be two types of bhuta in Vedic spirituality. There's the actual digestion of the stomach acid and, of the fire inside the body. And then there's another spiritual fire. It's like the kundalini fire. It's using everything, all of your karma, churning it into something whose light is greater than the sum of its karma. This is the true agni. It's unleashing the potential of the elements that we are into the pure light that is contained within the wood of those elements. That's really what agni is all about. This is going to be agni is easy to understand because it's so basic, it's so primal to the Vedas. And that's why it's important that we learn about Krittika. It's a very important nakshatra. So what we read is agniyeh Krittika. Krittika is defined by Ernst Wilhelm as white spots. I consider this to be an interesting aesthetic thing. For me, it kind of means, really, Krittika is like a cutter. It's like this laser, fiery action that's happening. It's described as the cutter in typical nakshatra parlance. So Ernst says that Krittika means white spots. It's almost like the intense magnifying glass magnifying an intense white spot. That's my own interpolation. My friend Teresa has thrown me 10 bones. Thank you, Teresa, my dear. I really appreciate you for making that sweet little donation, as you so often do. Teresa's keeping me alive. Now, agniyeh Krittika, the fiery nature of agni as the cutter, it requires sukram parastat, and through this sukram, Krittika produces jyoti meaning light. It's the light as in the principle of life and intelligence. Now, Ernst notes that sukram it can be translated as bright, clear, pure, and even semen. Anybody who knows Vedic cosmology and a bit of Vedic astrological Sanskrit knows that Venus relates with Sukram. Sukracharya is the priest associated with Venus, and another name for Venus is Sukra, and it means like sweetness. But this sweet sugariness has something to do with our spiritual nature expressed on earth, as it wants to be expressed on earth. That's very Venus. Venus is earthy. So Sukram really even can be translated into semen. What we know of semen is that it's this vitalizing, catalytic element of creation for us, for humans. So for both men and women, the metaphor of semen for Krittika, it means purity coming from the natural vitality of the body and also of the spirit, of the soul, of the essence of the self, whatever that means for the individual. There are lots of different ways of conveying the essence of the self, whether it's a DNA thing, whether it's a metaphysical, spiritual thing. All of these together in some ways relate with Sukram. Really, ultimately, it is like a spiritual thing, and it relates to the sun in a way. Krittika being the first nakshatra. It's a nakshatra of birthing. Not really of birthing, but it is the first nakshatra to be birthed in the cycle, at least according to the Taittiriya Brahmana. It's the first nakshatra. And Agni is really the most primal symbol of Vedic astrology. Sorry, my computer skipped a bit there. Agni is the most primary symbol of Vedic astrology, of digestion, digesting material to create the sum of spirit. So Ernst tells us the white spots, Krittika, of Agni, fire, are bright from above, meaning the brightness of Sukram gives birth to the light of Jyoti. And it really has to do with looking at the luminous spirit inside the self. If you live by the inherent nature of soul, you're bound to be cutting into the material reality. That's why Krittikas can be these instigators, and they can be sharp. But there's a softness that also comes from listening within with Krittika. It's a very interesting combination there. So that is how Ernst Wilhelm translates the passage. Now we're going to dig a little bit deeper here and get into how Vic Dicara translates the passage. And he's kind of telling us the same thing that I just ran us through, of course. Agni can be translated as fire, transformer, igniter, and leader. So this leadership quality of agniyeh, this ignition, and even it's a transformative quality of agniyeh. So agniyeh Krittika. Krittika is agni. So Krittika is really like the action of agni. The cutter. It's an actor, it's an initiator, and a catalyst is an important word that Vic is going to be using in his actual definition. Now, Shukra, as we know, is an energy container. It's a fuel, and it's glowing. Again, it represents Venus as the morning or the evening star. So Sukra is this nature of the self, as I would say it, because the nature of the inherent self, at its most joyful, the sattvic nature of the self, is Sukra. It's enjoyable. It can continually have vitality because the nature of the self is like a wellspring. When the self is doing what the self wants to do, energy just is. It's like you put a gardener in a garden, and you've just got all the elements needed to create more energy than is being put in. And then Jyoti relates with and is the expression of energy, light, and radiance. So how Vic Dicara describes it in his nakshatra videos is fire's catalytic act, needs fuel to activate energy. Now, a more concise version of this, as he has given us, is this comes from Nakshatra, the Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology, which is the book that I have in my hand. Fire's cataclysm needs fuel for light. The cataclysm, the initiation quality of agni that brings out the transformative qualities of spirit inside us, that quality of spirit needs fuel, like wood, like something, needs some kind of matter in order to express light. Now, what is the nature of this fuel? Vic Dicara's final word is the most thorough transliteration that we can get of the nakshatra, the one that comes from here. All this other stuff I've shown to kind of give you, Ernst's thing was the first thing that was really out there as a translation, but Vic was doing his work at the same time. Vic spent a lot of time just digging into these nakshatras, the translations, different words for it, and then conveying it in his own understanding of what the nakshatra Krittika means in the context of all the other nakshatras. So in my opinion, Vic's is the most combed through translation. So now we are going to start going through what we read in the Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology, Nakshatra, the Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology by Vic Dicara. This is Vic's idea of what the Taittiriya Brahmana is saying. And this, to me, is really the most important reading we can get in this whole video, really. But the extraneous information is good, too. That's why we're going to go through it. Now, what we read about Krittika Nakshatra is agniyeh Krittikaha Shukram Parastaj Jyotir Avastat. Fire's cataclysm needs fuel for light. So, through Vic's words, let's read a little bit about Agni. Agni is the god of fire. The word for fire, Agni, literally means the starter, the initiator, the one in front. Interestingly, a lot of this stuff in the nakshatras is, it was psychically entangled with the narrative of what's called the yagna, which is the Vedic fire sacrifice ceremony, which is the most important thing going in Vedic reckoning. The Vedic yagna fire ceremony is something that is the center of what Vedic knowledge is all about. It has to do with dharma, really, and using your karma, using the elements of karma, and producing jyoti through the fuel that is karma, and acting in dharmic ways which make a sum that is greater than the parts. Really, this first nakshatra is central. It defines and describes what the yagna fire ceremony is doing, and really it describes what humans are doing. This is a very important nakshatra and an important Nakshatra Sutra. Fire must go in front of a group, like headlights at the front of a car, Vic tells us. Fire must be kindled first, then the Vedic ceremony can be performed. Indeed, Krittika is the first nakshatra in traditional Vedic lists. This all highlights the fact that Krittika signifies cataclysm, initiative, and activation. Teresa's telling us that Bob Dylan's moon is in Krittika Nakshatra. Very interesting. I should get some celebrities whose moons fall into Krittika. Totally should have done that. Thank you, Teresa. I'm gonna write that down. Let's see. I did just have a thing that I would write down. Okay, I don't know where all my stuff is right now, but I am going to write that down. What the hell? Celebrities. So next time we talk about this stuff, we'll have a list of celebrities with the nakshatra, with the moon in this nakshatra. Because the moon falling into a nakshatra is a huge part of, it's the emotional temperament that you're going to experience of that nakshatra. So it's very important. So, Krittika. We've talked about agni, the deva, and what the word agni means. Now let's talk a little bit about Krittika, which is particular to this nakshatra. Agni is something that is universal to all of us. Thank you, Teresa. Teresa says that you got that out of Dennis Harness's Nakshatras. I have that book. So maybe at the end we'll see if we have time. I'll dig for some celebrities in that book who have Krittika Nakshatra moon. Now, Agni, when it comes to the devas of the nakshatras, all of the devas have importance to us. Just like how, even if you have no planets in Leo, Leo is still an aspect of your consciousness. It's a part of your energy field. Agni is a deva that is important to everybody. Krittika is a nakshatra that's important to everybody too, but, not everybody's going to really feel the nature of Krittika as a nakshatra. So this is specifically talking about Krittika Nakshatra, the quality of this nakshatra. The word Krittika is based on the root Krit, K-R-T. This root is very interesting because it has two primary meanings, which at first seem to have nothing to do with each other. On one hand, Krit means to do, to activate, to accomplish, and to create. On the other hand, Krit also can mean to cut, to divide, to tear, and to destroy. It's interesting that there's sometimes in life when doing this kind of destroying or breaking apart or combusting seems to destroy the material aspect of something, but can create a spiritual aspect. The nature of spirit has this, that's what the fire of Agni is. It's psychedelic to think about. So Vic asks, how can such different meanings exist for the same word? Krit means to do, activate, and create on one hand, but it also means to cut, tear, divide, and destroy. Getting something started requires energy, Vic tells us. How do you get that energy? By releasing it from some fuel source. How do you release fuel from its source? By cutting, breaking, splitting open its container. This is what Krittika is intended for. For example, eating releases energy from food, but it destroys the food in the process. Burning wood releases heat and light, but the wood is reduced to ash. Splitting an atom releases tremendous heat and light, but the atom is destroyed in the process. The word Krittika informs us that we are dealing with a sharp and energetic nakshatra. Usually the most common visual symbols for Krittika involve some sort of axe. It's not a gentle one, and it easily cracks things that are fragile. I think that Vic generally conveys Krittika to be more tikshna, which is sharp, rather than mixed of sharp and soft. So, now, what is this word sukra? Is the next word that we're looking up. Sukram. This word indicates fuel. It's an object that contains energy. The word often denotes things that hum and glow, because that is what energetic objects tend to do. The word is used as a name for Venus, because Venus glows so brightly. The word also denotes reproductive fluid, because such fluids are fuel containing the energy of life itself. And I like the word that he describes this as being reproductive fluid, which isn't necessarily sperm or semen. I think. Kind of interesting. I would have to sort of ask Vic that to be sure, because maybe the feminine creative reproductive essence could be conveyed through shukram as well. Now, the next word we're going to be looking up is Jyoti. Of course, everyone should recognize this as Jyotish. The word Jyotish in astrology means light, self-realization, self-illumination. So it's possible that Krittika could be an important aspect of self-realization. Essentially, you need to get into your own energy and burn it up a little bit. Burn up your own self in order to experience the pure light of what we truly are as transistors of Ishvara, of the divine energy inside of us. We have to burn up the ego in order to transmit that which is subtler and more energetic than the ego and the limited constraints of the idea of the self, caught up in the mind and the filtering valve of the brain, as I always like to say. Jyoti, that's why we call astrology Jyotish. The inner light, it exists as pure spiritual awareness beyond the karmas of the past lives and the past energy of astrology. And there's an essence of ourselves in there. And it can only be produced when we experience the subluminous aspects of sukram. It's the sukram, the luminous soul, that produces the jyoti of awakened spirit. And this will always require some kind of sacrifice, some kind of burning up of yourself. So, jyoti. The word jyoti indicates active, manifest energy. Most typically, light is what jyoti really means. Fuel has a glowing aura. It's shukra. When the energy creating that aura is released, it shines more openly and brilliantly, and that's jyoti. So Vic gives us a summary of Krittika. He says Krittika is a sharp, brilliant, active, and energetic, but unsympathetic and cutting nakshatra. Sharp, brilliant, active, and energetic, but it's unsympathetic and it's cutting. Its objective is to activate energy, but this makes it harsh and unsympathetic towards the energy container. In this case, I think what he's conveying here is really the planet, or, if you have any planets in there, whoever is the brunt of the energy of that planet can experience cutting. Sometimes this is ultimately just in the nature of any malefic. For example, the sun is a malefic planet. It burns things up. When the sun is very pronounced in somebody's chart, we can feel that they're cutting. It's because they're carving their soul kingdom into the material reality fearlessly as a leader, as the sun tends to do. If they have the sun close to any other planet, that planet's going to get burned up a little bit by the sun, even though it will be a part of the manifestation of their vision of their kingdom. It's ultimately still a burning thing. And so this is where we hear that in a similar way, Krittika is the same way. When you have Mars in Krittika, when you have any planet in Krittika, that energy is going to have an energy to it that is cutting in the same rather harsh and unsympathetic way towards the energy container, which can mean the self or the people who are helping to contain the Krittika energy. You could even think like if this is the 11th Lord in Krittika, then there's going to be a networking that's being done, conveyed through Krittika. It's like this is a person who is establishing networks of people in this hard, cutting, disciplined way, and it can kind of burn everybody who's involved with it, and there's probably going to be people involved with it because it's the 11th Lord, right? Doesn't necessarily mean, depending on the planet, if it's very well placed, and especially as we hear, we're going to read the interpretation Vic gives of it being welcome for sharper planets. That's when it can kind of go well. So let's read a little bit of this before we get too much into the interpretive here, of my own interpretation. Let's read Vic's interpretation. Krittika is welcome where inspiration and energy are needed, but it's unwelcome where delicate gentility and sympathy is called for. Right, inspiration and energy. That's where Krittika is welcome. It's unwelcome where delicate gentility and sympathy is called for. So what we read is that sharp, harsh, and destructive planets function well in Krittika, especially Mars and the Sun. Vic notes, though, that if they are in soft houses, like the 4th house, for example, or if they're involved with the lords of these softer houses, the implication is of being a little too sharp and critical, especially in emotional affairs, right? If the Sun or Mars are in the 4th house where they don't have good Digbala strength, they're already a menacing, destructive influence on what's supposed to be the soft 4th house. So for that to be in Krittika Nakshatra 2 is only going to exacerbate that quality of harshness to the things involved in that house. So the Sun and Mars indicate high metabolism and excellent capacity to digest food and sources of inspiration. Cool. Now, Saturn in Krittika suggests a blunt but effective critical outlook because it's a sharp, harsh planet too. K2 indicates extremely strong metabolism and insight, but it comes in unsteady bursts. K2 being the past life planet, past life symbol. You would have always in past lives been someone who has a strong metabolism, but it's almost unstable. You can just digest so much information and inspiration that you need to use whatever's going on in Rahu to grip it. Now, Rahu in Krittika is similar, and it's also outspokenly critical. Rahu in particular, Rahu in Krittika. It's outspokenly critical. So what we read is that the soft planets, this is Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter, these kind of suggest inspiration and insight into the arts. There's a cutting grip on what's happening in the artistic world where these soft planets are conveyed. So Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter in Krittika suggest inspiration and insight into the arts, intelligence, and law. But it can also suggest relationship challenges because these are supposed to be soft planets. These are supposed to be conveyors of the soft dimension of ourselves. Everybody's got hard spots where they got to be hard, and they got soft spots where they ought to be soft, especially when it comes to loved ones, communicating to loved ones and to friends. And people with Venus, Mercury, or Jupiter in Krittika tend to be a little bit sharp and kind of carelessly sharp in how they go about those things. Again, it all depends on other factors of those planets in the chart, but that is generally, I'd say, a safe interpretation. Now, the moon in Krittika suggests strong inspiration and motivation, but it's not an ideal indicator for gentle affections and intimacies. Right. So it shows a strongly inspired and motivated personality. But when it comes to gentle affections and intimacies, this person might be a little bit too hard, too sharp, trying to really ultimately get through it. You know, it's like, you know, you want to enjoy the meal. And this can make, Krittika can make even like a tantric person if they rein in the nature of what's probably a pitta nature in this nakshatra. That's something that I should actually find out for sure. Figuring out as I go along here. This is my first series on the nakshatras, so I'm figuring out what I want to do here. I'm looking up the dosha of Krittika Nakshatra. So, okay, Krittika is actually considered to be Kapha. Very interesting. So, in any case, the moon in Krittika is going to have a Kapha energy, which is interesting. Probably a long, slow build towards intensity and energy, and then once it's up there, it's up there. So there's a lot to talk about there in terms of that Kapha energy and nature, especially the moon there in that nakshatra, but I digress. Maybe we'll get there once we go through all of Ernst's, Vic Dicara's interpretation lines. Now, for each of these, Vic Dicara has given us a lesson. So if you have the moon in Krittika or an extreme emphasis of Krittika in your chart, this would be a useful life lesson to consider. Krittika's dependence on fuel gives it a hunger which often manifests as impatience. This hunger can consume people and things, leaving them feeling exploited and used, exhausting our sources of energy, leaving us feeling depleted and tired and in want of fuel. This is part of the Shukram Parastaj nature of the nakshatras. This is a cool interpretation. It's very important. Not only does it say that Krittika needs Sukram, the fuel, in order to produce its Jyotir, but really when Krittika is especially overemphasized, what happens is that we are drained of Shukram, because that's what we need in order to produce the Jyoti, the fuel, the energy, and catalysis of movement and initiation. So the important lesson is this. Everyone is dependent on sources of energy and inspiration, but we must not burn them out by exploiting them for our own purposes. If we do, we will always be in want of new fuel. It's very tantric. You know, it's like having a lover and using your lover as opposed to like taking care of them, making sure that they're happy, making sure that they have energy, making sure that they are equally being fueled as you take fuel from them. That's the way that Krittika, you know, it needs Shukram. It's interesting how these Nakshatra Sutras are conveyed, because it isn't just saying, get all the Shukram you can and you'll produce all the Jyotir that you can. It's saying you need a consistent, reliable source of Shukram, and you need to take care of that Shukram, of that fuel, of the love that you get in your life, of whatever it is, the fuel that you are. You want to be a steady burn. Don't just be, you know, Paramahansa Yogananda has said, especially when it comes to your devotion to spirituality and to meditation and to self-realization. You don't want to be a straw fire. A straw fire burns up quickly and there's much intense energy, and then there's nothing left at the end of it. The energy is not conveyed in as sustainable and ultimately as glorious a way when it's just a straw fire. You want hard, dense hardwood of devotion that you know is going to last a long time in order to meditate in the most profound, devoted way. It's the same thing with devotion to a partner. You want to have a partner that has dense, loving work that you could share between each other. Not just someone who you can kind of use and then go to the next thing, because you'll never have a sustainable fuel source in order to produce your jyoti. So don't exploit the sources of energy and inspiration in your life, or else you will always be in want of new fuel. Cartomancy Carmen has told us that this is your sun and ascendant. Very cool. I find the sun signs really do express a lot of the energy of the nakshatra. And if your ascendant being there too, this is probably an important energy for you. Cartomancy Carmen. So, to avoid exploiting and burning out our fuel sources, we must use them in a way that benefits them, the fuel source, as well as ourselves. Krittika can help people activate their inner potential, which is very inspiring and invigorating for everyone involved. It's really a male energy that kind of comes through there. Using energy sources by helping them more fully fulfill their potential creates a self-sustaining, catalytic energy cycle. If by helping me, you grow and prosper, your energy will renew itself, and you will be able to help me even more in the long run. It's in my better interest if you, my fuel source, are also helped by me being fueled by you. It's win-win situations, folks. That's what life's all about. But if by helping me, your resources are spent and you gain nothing, you wind up with nothing, and I wind up searching for new help. Very good, cool life lesson that comes from Vic Dicara there. Now, there are supplications here that are actually translated from chapter 3, verse 1 of the Taittiriya Brahmana. Supplication. Let Agni and Krittika protect us. Let the tools of our consciousness shine like this nakshatra. Let it fortify us with brilliant nourishment. Let light with flags of smoke shine on the world. Let fire's benevolent energy shine down from Krittika and make us strong. Beautiful. I love Vic Dicara. That's really just the best understanding of Krittika that we can get. It all gets condensed into this book. And, I just gave it to you, but there's even more on all the deities. There's little stories that he combines the narrative of the nakshatra gods, the true story of the nakshatra gods. I recommend grabbing this book yourself if you would ever like to check it out, because it's very informative. So, what we've just learned is interpretation that comes from the pure symbolism of what's given in the Taittiriya Brahmana. Very useful as our beginning source of information. Now, the next thing I want to look at is the 4 classical nakshatra characteristics. And at this point, let us be reminded that we have done the most important work, which is the bones. We've looked at the bones of how to interpret planets inside of Krittika Nakshatra. So now what I'm aiming to do in this series, folks, is to take those bones and use them as a lamp to see into the darkness of what has been traditionally given through other writings about the nakshatras. Now, when we get to the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras, it's possible we're going to be moving through even these characteristics of Krittika could have the distortion that I talked about. The distortion of possibly some of these characteristics are tag-along qualities from earlier associations of Krittika with its old sidereal sign, the sidereal Rashi that was anciently associated with it. So we know as tropical astrologers that the nakshatras have a quality that are separate from the Rashis. And we're looking to split these associations up because there's so much good information on these nakshatras, but we have to be wary of when historical, cultural misappropriation can happen when it comes to looking at the qualities of these nakshatras. So that's what we're looking at here is the 4 classical characteristics of Krittika Nakshatra. It's the activity, the 7 qualities of the nakshatra, the sexual yoni animal, and the kingdom. The kingdom is particularly considered important by Ernst Wilhelm. That's why it's kind of emphasized. Hi, Mom. Oh my God, how you doing? Do you want to say hi to my people? Hey, everybody. This is my mother. This is if you ever wonder where I get my hair from, it's this lady right here. How you doing, Mom? Nice to see you.
Brought your raw honey that you left at the house.
Thank you, Mom. I couldn't bring it last night because I didn't want to
know.
bring it to the party.
I'm sorry. I snuck in because I thought this is your time.
Well, this is my chilling time.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is me doing my thing.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
there's
come on
your
in,
raw
Mom.
honey and your maca.
Awesome, Mom. Thank you
I'm
so
not going to
much.
stay. I'm not going to interrupt.
Okay, well,
I love you.
Okay, I love you too. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Mom. I'd talk with you, but I got
No,
some...
I know. That's okay.
Okay, sweet.
All right.
But I'll stay in touch with you.
Okay.
And I'm seeing you next week either way, right?
I love you.
I love you too, Mom.
Okay.
Thank you so much for bringing
Goodbye,
that to
people.
me. You're the best, Mom. I love you. What a sweetheart. She got me my 3 kilograms of honey that I just ordered. Now my cats are going to go say hi to her. Thanks, Mom. Sweet. Okay. Thanks for your patience there, folks. Thank you, Teresa, for saying hello to my mom. She is a beautiful lady. So, So we're looking up the qualities of the nakshatras now. And it's important to consider that Ernst Wilhelm has given the animal, the kingdom rather. This is between the 3 kingdoms of plant, animal, and mineral. It's Jiva, Mula, and I believe it's Dhatu. And this kingdom is described by Ernst as being very important to the nature of the nakshatra. Now, the quality of Krittika is active. We could have figured that. The quality is sharp and soft. It's Tikshna plus Mridu. So that's mixed. Vic Dicara leans towards the sharpness, but I wouldn't. Don't quote me on it, but for now, this is the generally conveyed quality of Krittika Nakshatra. And the sexual yoni animal is the female sheep, is Krittika. So they do well when they're partnered up with someone who's the male sheep. And there's a whole other science when it comes to traditional Indian marriage analysis. And then, the Krittika is considered to be a jiva. It's the animal kingdom nakshatra. And it would be interesting to start unfolding what exactly that means to the nature of the nakshatra. So, these are some character qualities of the Krittika Nakshatra. Now, we've discussed and talked about the nature of Krittika quite a bit here. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys have been enjoying this. We have one more section to go into. Now, this next final section of today's reading, we are going to be discussing the native. And this is finally this bit, we're going to be discussing the native of a person born with an emphasis of Krittika, with the moon in Krittika, and as well, I think that we're also going to read some interpretations of just general planets in the nakshatra of Krittika. Now, what we're going to read is coming from a author who is a sidereal Rashi practitioner, which means this is the part where we're not talking about agni, we're talking about how to understand interpreting Krittika as a practical functional nakshatra, as a technique and tool of interpretation in personal horoscopy, which means we're getting into some details that require objectivity as to the possible bias that we can understand coming from the author. So let's just put on our hats of discernment and see whether what we read is going to relate in a way that we can understand and see the nature of the nakshatra in the person. So here we have the Krittika Native. The Krittika Native is full of energy, vitality, and passion. Like Agni, a devata capable of consuming continuous streams of oblations, this person has a large appetite for life. Beware, such drives and ambition greatly increase the native's chance of physical or mental burnout, as we already read from Vic Dicara. The shukram, which is required of this nakshatra, which produces the jyotir of radiant energy, needs to be balanced, needs to be maintained, the fuel, so you don't burn yourself out. Agni's subtle energy of tejas ignites mental fortitude and courage. So the native of Krittika, as well, also has an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and wisdom, and their tejas give ample opportunity for spiritual growth and illumination. This is not just a native, but anybody with a lot of planets in Krittika, or an emphasis of Krittika as well. Now, defensiveness is an attitude that's foreign to the Krittika person. They approach life proactively and confidently. They're fueled by an internal blazing fire, and they're drawn to new and exhilarating endeavors. Willing to assume risk, the Krittika person exhibits a pioneering and enterprising nature. Such personality traits are accompanied by a strong need for independence. Now, excuse me. The author is giving us some examples of people who are natives of Krittika Nakshatra. What we read is that Katharine Hepburn has the sun and moon in Krittika. She is a model native of Krittika Nakshatra, according to the author. Katharine Hepburn was well known for her fierce independence and headstrong attitude. Hollywood struggled with her refusal to fit the mold of the typical Hollywood starlet. According to her biography, Hepburn famously shunned the Hollywood publicity machine, and she refused to conform to society's expectations of women. She was outspoken, assertive, and athletic. She married once as a young woman, but thereafter lived independently. Cool. Now, what we read is that Agni's son, Kartikeya, is anointed Indra's army commander. So aggressive or competitive activities are similarly perfect outlets for the restless energy possessed by the Krittika person. Perhaps this person is skilled in martial arts or fencing. A sharp sword is the stellar configuration of Krittika, we have to remember. Another potential occupation suited to Krittika's assertive energy is as a member of the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force. Not surprisingly, the Krittika Native is often involved in professions requiring the application of heat or fire. So depending upon the chart, this person may be a shaman, a blacksmith, a welder, a firefighter, and so on. Shaman, very cool. If other chart indications support a career in the medical field, the native could even be a surgeon or a medical specialist who uses sharp or pointed instruments, like such as scalpels, sutras, hypodermic needles, etc. Agni is the eater of food amongst the gods, and also the agent used for cooking sacrificial oblations. So now, if the second Bhava Bhavesha, which means the lord of the second house. So if the lord of the second house, which relates to food, the second house relates to food, to resources, and to being well fed and well nourished. So if the second house lord implicates Krittika somehow, whether that means the second house cusp falls into Krittika, or whether the second house lord falls into Krittika, the person may be a connoisseur of food. If the third Bhava Bhavesha, which relates to interests and hobbies, so that's the third lord of the chart. If the third lord falls into Krittika, their love of cookery may be a favorite pastime. Now, if the 10th lord of the chart, because of course the 10th house relates to profession, so if the 10th lord falls into Krittika Nakshatra, perhaps this person is a chef or an employee in the restaurant industry. Cool. Wow, very specific. Very cool. So now, when there is affliction to things related to Krittika, Krittika can be associated with serious eating disorders. This runs the gamut from binge eating to poor dietary choices. Hence, digestive issues, which is a vitiated agni, are common. Recall that agni indiscriminately consumes large quantities of flesh, blood, and fat when burning the Khandava forest. This same indiscretion can spill over into other areas of life, especially in light of the healthy libido possessed by the native, the Krittika person. This spells trouble in the relationship department. Just as Agni dupes the wives of the Saptarishis by converting himself into their household fire, deception and trickery can at times be a component of the Krittika native's intimate relationships. Returning to Katharine Hepburn, her intense attraction towards Spencer Tracy led to a 27-year affair, despite the fact that Tracy was married to another woman. Now, depending on the nature and placement of the planet implicated, the Krittika native may instead be the victim of such devices. Let's recall that Svaha impersonates the wives of the Saptarishis in order to have her way with Agni. Agni had such a desire, and he was blinded by his own passion, so he couldn't see through Svaha's deception. Thus, the Krittika native may be the instigator or the victim in schemes involving lust and manipulation. Just as the native's intimate relationships are plagued by unusual circumstances, So too is their familial life. Kartikeya is born from Agni's seed, yet Agni is unaware that he has a son. 7 stepmothers tend to Kartikeya's nursing. This native may incur similar experiences. Perhaps there's a question as to his real parents, the use of a surrogate parent, adoption, multiple births. Kartikeya is born with 6 heads, or the birth of an unplanned child. These are all possibilities. Now, despite the potential for desire and ambition to get the best of him, the Krittika Native is capable of great accomplishments in life. Careers which reward risk-taking and independence are perfect avenues for distinguished success, as are those requiring leadership acumen and mental ingenuity. Agni is the priest of the sacrifice who administers all communications between the divine and mundane realms. Such skill, coupled with passionate expression, may give an interest in clergy, ambassadorship, or advocacy. Ambassadorship, being an ambassador for something, or someone who advocates for something on the part of other people. Now, Jesse Jackson is somebody who had the moon and the Lagnesha in Krittika. The Lagnesha is the Bhavesha of the Lagna, so it's the ruler of the ascendant. So Jesse Jackson had his moon and the ruler of his ascendant in Krittika. Mind you, this is a sidereal practitioner, so let's for now just be happy enough saying that they had the moon and some other planet in Krittika. So Jesse Jackson embodies several important Krittika traits. For example, his parenting involved unusual circumstances. Jesse Jackson's mother became pregnant as a teenager by a much older married man. Soon after Jackson's birth, she married another man who adopted Jesse as his son. Jesse Jackson desired to be a preacher early on. He attended the Chicago Theological Seminary and was later ordained as a Baptist minister. When Jesse Jackson met and went to work for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his life changed dramatically. The experience transformed Jesse Jackson and launched his career into politics. A great leader and passionate speaker, Jackson was politically active and in 1984 ran for president. Now, lastly, a great advocate for equal rights, Jackson founded the National Rainbow Coalition, an organization that campaigns for equal rights for African Americans, women, and homosexuals. Dope. Fucking right. Good for Jesse Jackson. That's awesome. Now, Teresa says that Jesse Jackson is fire. He talks so fast that they used to have a radio show based on people calling in trying to figure out what he said. Cool. Awesome, Teresa. Good one. So that's Jesse Jackson. I don't really know him too well, and I'm glad that I've heard about this about him. Now, here is something that we might not even speak to it because it's a sidereal reference. Yeah. Cool. So, finally, coupled with the pioneering and enterprising nature of this nakshatra, the moon here becomes a vehicle for great innovation and creativity in particular. And that is that, ladies and gentlemen. That has been our reading of Agni and Krittika Nakshatra, coming from the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras as portrayed in the Vedas. That was pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm glad that in the end we get to have, after all the in-between learning about the nature and character of the deva associated with the nakshatra, Krittika, we got to learn about Krittika and how does everything we've learned about the deva relates to the character that we would expect to see displaying an emphasis of Krittika, or the moon in Krittika, or the Lagnesha in Krittika, or any of these pronounced chart placements. So there's a lot there, a lot to digest, and digesting is the important figure here. So I'm very glad that I got to hang out with you guys and to do this with you, to share in the nature of these nakshatras. Stay tuned, keep your eyes peeled, because in the future I'm going to be doing more of these nakshatras, as well more of my rising sign videos and all the stuff that you guys can typically expect from me coming from How to Rock Astrology. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thank you so much, Teresa and Susie Underwood, for hanging out with me like you guys always do. And I'm expecting to be back on the horse talking about nakshatras as well as all this stuff. I'm going to try to get it going again weekly, every Sunday. If you guys are here, you'll see me. We'll hang out and we'll have some fun. Thank you, Susie, my dear. It's always a real pleasure hanging out with you. Thanks for everybody. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts about how we've interpreted the nakshatra. I'd love to hear anything that you think, anything that you think we could do better or talk about or discuss. You know, I think the last thing I would have wanted to discuss is the fact that I often talk about how I'm getting into Ayurveda, and so there's a difference between the emotional temperament of the moon and an emphasis on a nakshatra. You can look up Vic Dicara's website, and he has nakshatra readings where he describes what is the most emphasized nakshatra in your chart. And what I've learned, especially through my girlfriend has an emphasis of Swati nakshatra, which is Kapha, and she has the moon in Parani, which is Pitta. So her fiery Pitta emotions are often sort of drowned by her Kapha body temperament. She's an emotionally Pitta person, but her body is Kapha. And so this is something that you might want to feel out and experience as relates to the emotional nature of Krittika. And it's interesting to me, you know, I'm reading, when I read this, I read that Krittika is considered to be Kapha. And I'm really surprised about that. I would have thought that it would have been considered to be Pitta. But Krittika Nakshatra seems to be Kapha. Now, it's interesting when you read into and you get into Ayurveda, you realize that oftentimes this is how they kind of work. For example, yes, so Krittika is considered to be Kapha dosha. You have to understand that when you think about it, Kapha, it takes on a lot of body. They usually have large bodies, which means that a large-bodied person, a large-bodied somatotype, requires a lot of food, requires a lot of heat and energy, and it even needs it. So it's interesting to consider how that would be. And I need to find out where my emphasis is. Can you do a video on that? So Teresa, the emphasis, you could get it from Vic Dicara. He has his nakshatra emphasis readings. You go on vicdicara.com, you look at your readings, and you get a nakshatra reading. It's about $27, and I think it's just very illuminating. From there, you would look up what is the most emphasized nakshatra in your chart. Then you just look it up online. You look up on Google, and you look up what's the dosha of that nakshatra. Sometimes it's often both, because the moon gives big points in terms of what is the most emphasized nakshatra. For example, for me, I've got the moon in Jesta, and I've also got Mercury in Jesta in the 5th house. So they're considered to be, because there's two very strong planets there, Jesta is the most prominent energy for me, and it's my moon. Whereas for my girlfriend, she has her Lagna and her Lagnesha in Swati, but her moon is in Bharani. So that's why Swati for her has more overall emphasis points. So her body is Kapha, Swati, but her mental and emotional energy is the moon in Bharani. And there's a contradiction there. For me, I've got to worry about my moon also being my most emphasized sign, which means I can be too Vata. Jesta is a Vata nakshatra. So I'm too much air. That's partly why I organize all my videos with these books, and I have a presentation. It's to keep me grounded while I do the air thing that I do. And that's part of what makes me who I am as a Vata person. So this is something that Fiona talks about this a lot, and I should do a video with her on it. Thank you, Teresa. I would like to check that out. But in any case, I don't want to spend too long on this, but Krittika is Kapha. Think about what that means in terms of what your needs are in Ayurveda. If you have the moon there, it means that this Kapha energy is something that you do need to subsist through mentally and emotionally. It's good for you to slow down, to have a groove, because the Krittika energy is going to come through you. So as Krittika, as the fiery energy is coming through you, you are going to desire to ground yourself. And it's good to be grounded. And if you have an overemphasis of Kapha, then you've got to explore how you can use Pitta and Vata to balance that out. So eventually I'll be talking about that. I'm going to be making videos on that too, and I'm going to bug Fiona about it. So thanks for that, Teresa. But in any case, folks, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm Dustin Cormier. This is How to Rock Astrology. Keep your eyes peeled because we got more stuff coming down. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next